If there's one supplement that gets talked about more than almost any other in the gym world, it's creatine. And unlike most things sitting on supplement store shelves, this one actually has the research to back it up. Multiple studies confirm it can meaningfully improve strength, support long-term muscle gains, and even boost anaerobic capacity and power output. So the question isn't really, does it work? That's been settled for years. The real question, the one almost nobody answers properly, is how do you actually use it correctly to get the most out of it? And what are you risking if you don't? That's exactly what we're breaking down. Before we get into the how, it's worth understanding the why, because once you know what's actually happening inside your muscles, the rest of this will make a lot more sense. When you lift weights, your muscles run on ATP, your body's primary energy currency for short, intense effort. The problem is ATP runs out fast. Creatine's superpower is helping regenerate that ATP more quickly, which is what allows you to grab that extra rep or two that you otherwise couldn't. Your body already produces some creatine naturally, and you get more from certain protein-rich foods, but supplementing allows you to push your muscle creatine stores well beyond what your body would manage on its own.
Here's something most people don't realize, though. Not everyone responds to creatine the same way. Some people are what researchers call responders, typically people with a higher percentage of type 2 muscle fibers and lower starting creatine levels. Others are non-responders, and they tend to have the opposite profile. There's no easy lab test for this outside of a clinical setting, but there is a practical clue. If you're a responder, you'll likely notice a bigger than usual jump in body weight after a month or so of supplementation. That's water being pulled into your muscles alongside the elevated creatine. So the real-world approach is simple. Try it, track your strength and your weight over a few months, and see if the response is bigger than what you'd normally expect. Now that you understand the mechanism, let's get into what actually moves the needle.
First, the type of creatine you buy. Walk into any supplement aisle and you'll see endless versions promising superior results. Buffered creatine, HCl, ethyl ester, and more. Despite the marketing, the research is clear that these claims of superiority are, for the most part, unfounded. There's one exception worth mentioning, a form called polyethylene glycosylated creatine, which one study found could match monohydrate strength benefits using roughly 75% less of the dose, suggesting more efficient absorption. But this finding hasn't been widely replicated yet, so it's not something to bet your money on just yet. For now, the smartest move is still plain creatine monohydrate. The only real exception is if monohydrate upsets your stomach. In that case, a buffered or micronized version might be worth trying instead.
Second, and this one surprises a lot of people, what you take your creatine with actually matters. There's a common belief that it makes no difference, but the data tells a different story. Research shows that muscle creatine levels rise significantly more when creatine is paired with carbohydrates, or with carbohydrates and protein together, compared to taking it completely alone. In some studies, pairing it with carbs and protein nearly doubled creatine absorption compared to taking it by itself. One study even gave specific numbers, recommending roughly 47 grams of carbs alongside 50 grams of protein for enhanced retention. In practical terms, that just means taking your creatine alongside a real meal or a shake that includes a decent amount of both carbs and protein, rather than just tossing it into a glass of water on its own. Third, timing. Again, this is something a lot of people assume doesn't matter, but a couple of studies comparing pre-workout versus post-workout creatine intake found a slight edge toward taking it after training. The benefit wasn't massive, but when you combine that with the fact that most people already have a post-workout meal or shake loaded with carbs and protein, post-workout timing ends up being the more practical and slightly more effective choice.
So, how should you actually start taking it? There are 3 approaches. The first is loading, taking around 20 grams a day for 5 to 7 days, then dropping to a maintenance dose of 3 to 5 grams daily after that. The second is skipping the loading phase entirely and just taking 3 to 5 grams a day from the start, which gets you to the same elevated creatine levels, just more gradually.
Both methods land you in the same place. Loading just gets you there faster. The third approach, cycling on and off creatine, doesn't appear to offer any real advantage, and it's not necessary either, since your body's natural creatine production doesn't seem to shut down or compensate from long-term use. Now, let's talk about safety, because this is where a lot of misinformation tends to creep in. Creatine has been studied extensively since the 1990s, over 1,000 studies at this point, including long-term research with subjects taking high doses for up to 5 years. Across all of that research, the only consistently reported side effect has been weight gain from water retention. Some people do experience minor stomach discomfort if they take creatine without enough water, or diarrhea if they take too much at once, both of which are easily avoided by staying hydrated and spreading your intake throughout the day, especially during a loading phase.
Then there's the hair loss question, probably the most searched for creatine concern out there. This entire fear traces back to a single 2009 study that found creatine supplementation increased DHT levels in male rugby players. Since DHT is linked to hair loss in people genetically predisposed to male pattern baldness, some assumed creatine might accelerate that process. But here's the key detail almost nobody mentions. This finding comes from exactly one study, and it has never been replicated, nor has it ever actually been shown to cause hair loss in practice. If you don't have a family history of male pattern baldness, this likely isn't something worth worrying about. If you do, it might be a factor to keep in mind, but the current evidence is far too thin to draw a firm conclusion either way. So here's where that leaves you. Creatine is genuinely one of the most well-researched, safest, and most effective supplements available for anyone who lifts weights. Stick with monohydrate, pair it with a meal containing carbs and protein, take it post-workout if you can, and choose either the loading or non-loading protocol based on how quickly you want results. But don't lose sight of the bigger picture. Creatine is a small piece of a much larger puzzle. Your training and your nutrition will always matter more than any supplement ever could. Get those right first. Creatine is simply the extra edge on top, not the foundation underneath it.